Okay, we are live. I am so excited to be here today with Dr. Rebecca Sand from Wisdom Medicine to chat about perimenopause and career. If you haven't been to one of these before, I'm Ashley. I'm the founder of Sundays, which is an executive assistant service for working parents. We help parents get more focused time back at work and more quality time back with their families. And we love bringing together these conversations around similar topics that a lot of the people we work with run into every day. Perimenopause is especially near and dear to our hearts. It is a natural phase of every woman's life, but it is often overlooked. So whether you're currently navigating perimenopause, will navigate perimenopause, or just want to understand how to support others, we are super excited to have you here today. And let me share a little bit about Dr. Rebecca. She is a licensed naturopathic physician and acupuncturist based in Portland, Oregon. After spending years in medical research across labs in the US and China, she decided to pivot to direct patient care. And she uses both Eastern and Western medical approaches to bring better health and healing. She is passionate about helping women live their healthiest and fullest lives, deeply knowing and supporting their bodies throughout all stages of their lives. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm just thrilled to be here. And as a busy mother myself, I just love what you're doing. And I'm excited to chat more about this topic today.
Yeah, amazing. Well, before we dive into perimenopause, I would love to hear a little bit about Wisdom Medicine and what you guys do.
Totally. Yes. So Wisdom Medicine is a fully virtual naturopathic clinic designed specifically for women. This is what we do. This is what we specialize in. And we are a team of naturopathic physicians like myself and functional nutritionists who provide very individualized care for the women we get to work with. And our aim is really to uncover the root of certain symptoms and life transitions like perimenopause for people, using both the best of natural and modern medicine to kind of meet people exactly where they need that support. We are proud as an organization to get people in quickly, usually within 2 weeks. Frankly, because we believe that women deserve better than a lot of the care that they're often getting out there. So we give longer visits, usually 30 to 60 minutes with us, and you'll get 10 visits with us throughout the year.
That is amazing. I'm so glad that Wisdom exists, and I hope that more women get a chance to engage with you guys. Okay, I would love to start by just talking about some definitions, because I think, at least for me, perimenopause was a pretty new term that I've learned in the last couple of years. I'm sure it existed long before then, but maybe hasn't gotten the publicity that it deserves.
Yeah.
So could you tell me, what is perimenopause versus menopause? And how do you think about that from a medical perspective?
Yes. And we'll probably even talk about why everyone's confused about this too, because there are really good reasons. But we first want to start with what is menopause, because perimenopause is sort of the time around, that's what peri means, around menopause for people. So menopause, most of us know, is when we haven't had a period for 12 months. That's when we're like in the club. And the average age of that is like 51 to 52 for most of us, especially in Western countries in the United States. Perimenopause is that transitional phase that happens before that. It's the years often leading up to menopause when, the way I like to describe it, our brain and our ovaries are learning how to communicate differently. It usually is going to begin probably about, on average, I think it lasts about 6 to 10 years for people, but it can be as short as a couple months, can be 5 years. And a good way to kind of predict this is asking anyone in your family who's biologically related to you what that transition was like for them. I often have my patients do this because it gives us the best insight into what that time frame might be for you and what symptoms they may have gone through for that. But it's, I think on average, I think I misspoke. I think it's about 4 to 8 years for most people, which is a long time.
Yeah.
That's a significant chunk of time to be wondering, is this normal? Is this abnormal? And what can I expect to happen from here for a lot of folks?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that just bringing to light what's normal is so helpful, especially for topics like this that can sometimes be a little bit taboo.
Right.
And I think you already mentioned this, but what age does perimenopause typically begin, kind of on average?
Yeah, so a lot of us can really expect to see these changes if we are going to experience them in our 40s. That's kind of on average when people start to learn like, oh, this is a thing. And maybe your doctors will start to talk to you about this, or maybe you'll be talking about it with your peers. But some people, it starts in their 30s or late 30s as well.
Amazing. And why are people so confused about what perimenopause is?
Yep.
And I think that leads to a lot of underdiagnosis as well.
Yes, yes. So, four things with this. There are four main reasons that if I can kind of chunk them together that I think everyone's so confused about it. The first is I think what we mentioned a little bit before is we don't talk about it. We don't talk about menopause either. It's sort of we teach women to kind of just suffer in silence. We normalize things that are abnormal for people, and we don't really have community discussion around these changes that happen. So I really firmly believe that women deserve better, and we do deserve to talk about what happens, the good, the bad, and the weird that can happen during these years for people. The second thing here, though, is the timeline, as we already talked about, and the symptoms of perimenopause are so variable. It's very person to person, and for a lot of us, that transition can be gradual. Also, there's a lot of overlap with different changes in our body at this time that can also happen. So, sleep disturbances, insulin resistance, anxiety, depression, weight gain for some folks, maybe raising teenagers at this time for a lot of people, that are also big physiologic shifts for us that we need to kind of take into context. The last that I'm sure we'll talk about here, so my fourth point with this is we don't really have definitive lab testing to diagnose perimenopause. And I don't even want to use the term diagnose because it is, as you said, a normal thing. It is normal. We will start to see some things change during this time. And I absolutely do lean into labs. We'll probably get to talk about that, how that can be useful later. But there isn't like a, this lab will tell us you're in the club or not sort of thing.
That makes sense. Why do you think it is useful for women to start understanding what perimenopause is and maybe even earlier than they're experiencing it?
Yes, yes. So I would say anyone who's had a period, it's probably a good idea to get some information about this, and especially if you're in your 30s, especially if you're in your 40s. But we can essentially use this information to set ourselves up for a healthier and easier menopause and life post-menopause. So there's so many things that we can kind of tweak and optimize and support better than I think mainstream healthcare for the most part, and for sure the internet is guiding us all to do. I do think the internet is full of things that might help or we should be doing at this time, but it's often laced with a lot of shame, and you can really spin your wheels trying to figure out what relates to you and not. But in a lot of realms, when I'm working with women, they're already killing it at certain realms, but there are other things that may not have been on their radar that we can support and get them to a better platform where this hormonal transition might be easier for them. And that's worth a lot.
Yeah. Okay, quickly speaking on the internet, I know that I'm going through my first pregnancy right now, which we've been talking about, and I know the internet can have a lot of great and also not so definitive information. For perimenopause, is there a place on the internet that you recommend people go to kind of get the basics besides listening to this talk?
There are a lot of good, any of the scientific sites. So the American College of Gynecology is wonderful, ACOG. There are a bunch of Canadian websites. I can't think of their site off of the top of my hand, but I can definitely send them to you, and we can send them to folks after the fact. There are wonderful books out there. One book that I have a lot of my patients read is called Estrogen Matters. And that is, there are tons of books that will sort of validate your symptoms and give you community around everything that's going on. And that is so, so, so important, that you're normal and this is okay and you're going to get through it. But this book in particular goes through a lot of the science and the confusion that I would even argue doctors have around this topic. So it's on my essential reading list for perimenopause.
I love it. Okay, estrogen matters. I'm adding it to my list now.
Great audiobook provided.
Amazing. Okay, let's talk more about the symptoms of perimenopause. What are some of the telltale signs that you're entering perimenopause? How can you differentiate that from regular PMS or other symptoms that you might experience?
Totally great question. This is tricky, and it's because it's so variable and diverse person to person here. So I'm just going to list off a bunch of symptoms to begin with.
Okay.
The first one is irregular menstrual cycles. especially if you've been someone who's like every 28 days on the clock. If your cycles start getting longer, shorter, heavier, lighter, that can be a change that the way your brain and your ovaries are communicating is a little different. Now they're kind of figuring out a new rhythm together. We also might see sleep disturbances, mood changes, which might sound a lot like PMS to people, but they might get heightened during that time. Some people often will have hot flashes or night sweats. Those tend, if they're going to happen, they tend to get worse during menopause for folks, but they absolutely can be part of perimenopause. Breast tenderness is another one. Decreasing fertility. Fertility can change during that time. And paired with that, oddly, can be an increase in libido for a lot of us, which is a pleasant surprise for some people. Some people go the other way and have a decreased libido. Another one that a lot of people don't talk about enough, in my opinion, is joint pain. So I'll have a lot of women who come to me and just say, like, I've never been someone with aches and pains. Like maybe here and there I'll take an ibuprofen, but all of a sudden my knee pain is like getting in the way of me doing my exercise or lifting my kids or whatever it is I need to be doing. And that's new, and that can absolutely be a hormonal shift for folks. And then other things like brain fog, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, sleep changes, those can all be part of it as well. And those can really impact quality of life and work life for people that we want to support better. And the last kind of oddball here is heart palpitations. And I like people to know that because anything heart freaks us out, and it should. But that can happen with those changes in estrogen. And again, might be a signal that it's worth talking to your doctor about that, because that can get in the way of you doing your day as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. And I think you mentioned earlier talking to your own family members about what their experience is like is a good way to kind of predict what symptoms might be coming your way.
Yeah, I'm always hoping, if they know, if a patient knows their biological mother, like go for it. If the mom is willing to talk about it, and if the mother didn't have just her uterus taken out as a solution, which was quite the thing back in the day, but also like an older sister, even a half sister who went through it before you. It's a real gift if you were the younger one to kind of protect what might happen.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Should I be concerned about changes in my menstrual cycle, like heavier bleeding or irregular periods during perimenopause?
For some people, for sure, of course. And I do think this is something that gets overlooked quite a bit in menopause. We just say, oh, that's menopause, that's perimenopause, that's normal. And there are lines of normal, but there are lines that are absolutely not normal. And I think we need to do better, kind of making sure people are informed about that and also getting help. But we absolutely want to be monitoring for more frequent cycles or heavier bleeding, or both, during this time. Something that we kind of talk about in medicine is during that perimenopausal period, we will sometimes see like an accordion effect. Periods might get closer together. Sometimes they space out. But what can be really affect quality of life and nutrient levels for people is if they start to get closer together, or your periods start to get closer together, like maybe even twice a month, every 20 days, something like that, and they're heavier, you're going to run out of iron very quickly. You're not going to feel good. Your body is just bleeding all the time. That is not normal. That deserves attention. And it's really important that we get that figured out. And, as I said a little bit ago, a lot of our mother's generation, like maybe if that happened, they would just scoop the uterus out. Although that's a surgery that saves lives, and we do need that sometimes. Thank goodness we figured out some better ways to support women during this time. We have wonderful herbs that can help with this, herbs that actually help to tonify the blood vessels of the uterus. And then we also, this is kind of a backwards relationship that I really want people to know about. If you have iron deficiency, which a lot of women do, if you have iron deficiency, you're also more likely to bleed more during menopause and perimenopause.
Interesting.
And childbirth. So that's a big part of, when we get to work with women is we look at their iron levels in a lot of different ways and make sure that we're just setting people up for a healthier transition and everything that we can do to have them not bleed so much, because that's not fun for anyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I assume there are iron supplements and things like that that you can take to help get your levels back up if that testing shows that you need
100%.
it.
Yes. And there are many kinds. So, having someone who can kind of wade through one that's going to feel good on your tummy and actually work is really helpful because you don't want to, it's so easy to just drop cash on supplements and whatnot. And you want to make sure you need it and you want to make sure that it's the right fit for you.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I probably spend too much time on Instagram, but it's hard to know sometimes if I'm like, is this marketing? Is this the thing that I actually need? And sometimes it can be really life changing. So it's
I know.
wonderful to have
It's a
someone you can trust
wonderful
to help you.
world, yes, of natural medicines, but there are also a lot of people making a sizable profit off of preying on what you've talked about with your friends,
Yes.
and I mean, that's cool in some ways. It like personalizes your shopping, but how can you trust it? And part of our naturopathic education is knowing what things are reputable, what dose you need to be on, because that isn't really what's listed on the bottle for the most part. Um,
Hmm.
Even interpreting lab values, you can't just leave it at like this was high, this was low. Something that I really want people to understand is lab values, like what's going to tell you if you're iron deficient or not. Those lab values aren't standardized. So if you were to get a blood draw at one lab versus another lab, it may have totally different reads on what was high or low. And that's
Interesting.
really important to know because I'll see labs where, a patient of mine might say, yeah, my iron's totally normal. Meanwhile, I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is awful. Like based on our medical literature for your demographic, this is not normal. Um,
Hmm.
but maybe a clinician missed it because it wasn't flagged as low based on that lab.
Yeah.
Um,
Very
and
interesting.
that's just an oversight, but women are suffering because of it.
Wow. Okay. Well, I want to get more into into what's possible in terms of remedies, but my last question on symptoms is: can you get pregnant during perimenopause, and how should what should people be aware of?
Yes, 100%. Of course, you can still get pregnant. So really, we say until you haven't had a period for that full year, you can definitely get pregnant. Things change quite a bit. So, the fertility rates tend to go down during this time simply because we're not ovulating as often. But because we're not ovulating as often, sometimes what will happen is we'll ovulate twice in a month, or we'll ovulate 2 eggs at once or 3 eggs at once. And that's why the chances of conceiving with multiples, like twins or triplets, actually can go up during this time for people. So if your goal is not to conceive and get pregnant, you still want to be using your birth control or abstinence methods during this time, because I can promise you I've seen it a lot for folks. Even people who have a history of infertility or struggles with that, things just change during perimenopause, and it's a very different landscape.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, I want to spend a good chunk of time on solutions and how you think about that. And since we already started talking about the things that we see advertised on the internet, there are there natural remedies and supplements that you recommend or frequently recommend that might alleviate perimenopause symptoms?
You bet. There are. This is one of my favorite topics of all time to talk about. Just kind of like broad reaching here. For like hot flashes, night sweats, that's a big one that can kind of start to creep in. And no one wants to get hot flashes in the middle of a work meeting or, visit with clients or things like that. Or really just anytime. They're sort of miserable. But one thing that's been used for thousands of years in herbal medicine is sage, which some of us might even be growing in our backyard or easily be able to pick up at the grocery store. But sage, even brewed simply as a tea, iced tea perhaps for some people, can really help with those temperature shifts that we see during that time. Another lovely herb is something called black cohosh. And this has a long history of helping with hormone regulation, hot flashes and night sweats in the perimenopausal period as well. And I use both regularly in my practice. There's also another one that I'm sure most folks have heard of called maca. Maca is a root from the Peruvian Andes, and this can help with a lot of the things I described in perimenopause. So we've got libido, sleep, stress, hot flashes, energy levels, cognitive function. It's wonderful. You can add it to your smoothies. You can take it as a pill. It's really easy to take, and it doesn't taste disgusting, which I think is worth a lot for folks. But I really want to talk about, in terms of natural remedies, this is a time that I often catch nutrient deficiencies for people that may have been around for a long time, especially if anybody has been pregnant in the past, that we kind of overlooked. And if we can replete these nutrients for folks, specifically what their body needs, I see huge changes in mood, energy levels, brain fog, sleep, and bleeding, like I talked about. Big ones you want to be thinking about are iron, vitamin D, and our B vitamins, but there are many others, including minerals.
That is a good thing to be on the lookout for. I am personally writing down all of these things to get tested for in the near future.
Yes.
Um, in
It takes
addition,
a lot of nutrients to grow a baby, a lot more than people think.
yeah, yeah. I was listening to another podcast about like how interesting like how much humans really give to growing a baby just biologically, and it's very interesting.
It's validating. I found it because it
Yes.
felt like it.
Okay, what about lifestyle changes that might help with symptoms?
Yeah. So the way I look at lifestyle changes, because I work with a lot of folks who are quite busy managing a lot of things. I would argue women in general tend to do a lot of that, where we are keeping the household afloat. Oftentimes we're very busy in work, and during our perimenopausal period, a lot of us are in a time of our career that things are booming. We have a ton of demand. So I don't want to just sit there and tell people you need to exercise more. You need to get 25 hours of sleep a night. You need to eat like a purely organic whole foods diet. No one can do that. No one can do that. So we kind of look at this as like a shopping list of like what is accessible to you right now, what actually might even sound inviting to be adding in right now. But big ones that are we really want to talk about during the perimenopausal period, if it is accessible to people, is first one is sweating. So anything that people can add in to kind of get themselves to sweat. The reason is that this helps to detoxify those hormones that are kind of going through the roof during that time, especially estrogen. Sweating engages the liver in our detoxification pathways. So this can be something like cardio, running down the street, or even a sauna if you have that available to you to just kind of help support that system. Other things are sleep and relaxation. So if anybody told me like you need to sleep more, I don't know what I would say back to them. But my sleep is not dictated by me right now; it is by my little kiddo, and that's the phase of life we're in. But if you can't bulk up on sleep, really be thinking about ways you can kind of turn the volume down on your nervous system. So the reason this really helps with hormones is because of cortisol, which is also having a time on the internet right now. I love that. But cortisol can really rev in those of us who are quite busy and just go, go, go throughout the day. And it directly impacts our hormones, generally not for the better. So anything that you can do to kind of build in little buffers throughout your day for relaxation, peace, walks with friends, getting outside and just feeling the sun in your face does a lot more than I think people give credit to during this time for folks. The other two kind of go together, but diet and alcohol, wherever we can be swapping out, our alcoholic drinks for other versions. I want people having that social time. I want people doing things that are relaxing. But alcohol very specifically is getting in the way of our estrogen detoxification, potentially leading to even more estrogen circulating in the body, worsening our breast tenderness, worsening our mood issues, worsening our sleep and our insulin resistance and all these things that kind of go with that. So anything, switches we can kind of make to keep that social and enjoyment time alive, but without hurting our liver and hormones as well. And then diet. So any person who tells you this diet is right for everyone is making money off of you. That is never true. We are all different. Our metabolic needs are different. I think it's really important that what we focus on in perimenopause is fiber, protein is huge, and fat. And a lot of us are killing it in those realms, but bodies might need different ratios depending on what's going on from their microbiome standpoint, again, medical history or things like that. But if someone has weight gain, fatigue, food cravings, that may indicate that perimenopause is tied to things like insulin resistance, maybe thyroid dysfunction, other things that are clues to kind of figure out how to individualize this for folks to make it feel nourishing and hopefully easy in the long run for people to do.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Okay, for a lot of our audience, they are balancing really ambitious careers at the same time that these big body changes are happening. How can they understand what's happening and then also set themselves up to still be able to do their best work?
Oh, absolutely. I love that. Big body changes. I'm gonna tell them. That's wonderful. Yes, this is really, really important. And another thing we don't talk about enough for people, but it really comes down to our bodies love routines and rest wherever we can get it. But if your body is going through a transition like this hormonal transition of perimenopause or menopause, Take time to let your body physiologically catch up to you. Your brain has probably been trained to work and work and work and show up and work, but your body's going through something right now. So again, anything that we can be doing to nourish ourselves so that we can continue to do the things that we need to do for others is hugely important. The other thing I'll say to this is your body deserves to be listened to. So if fatigue, irregular periods, aches and pains, any of the things that we talked about become a barrier to you getting your work done, I really encourage everyone to find a doctor that they have confidence in that can support you through this. You shouldn't have to suffer through perimenopause, and we absolutely have the tools to help and do better by women.
Okay, so if you are at that point where you are reaching out to a doctor, what can you expect and what I know there might be some lab testing. Where does that come into play?
Yeah, so lab testing is a really mixed bag. I might even say controversial during this phase. I totally use it, but I'm really like honest with people about what it's showing and not. So again, there isn't a test that says like you are in perimenopause. I wish there was, because that would make things a lot easier, but it's more of a cluster of changes that we're seeing for people. So sometimes what we look at is, again, how the brain and the ovaries are talking to each other. That can be labs like a follicle stimulating hormone, FSH, and estradiol, which is sort of a version of estrogen that we can pick up in our blood tests for that. Those are variable during menopause. They might be all over the place, but if we catch different time points, they can be helpful in some groups of people. Again, to kind of just get a read on how things might be shifting for folks. Other things that we definitely want to look at no matter what are thyroid, or other things like nutrients I talked about, metabolic markers, our fasting glucose to look at insulin resistance or any shifts in our metabolism that might be getting in the way of people leading lives that feel good to them or body changes that are feeling uncomfortable for them. So when I get to work with people, especially in my perimenopausal folks, there is a broad panel that we do once a year. Not because I'm necessarily looking for things being way off where we need to talk about, hit it over the head kind of strategies, but I'm looking at trends for people. So if your values are still within the normal range, but it's quite a jump from where you were last year, that gives us this perfect opportunity to support your body in ways that maybe we didn't need to before. Those nutrient values are a really big one, especially if you're noticing heavier bleeding or more fatigue around your periods, because that can happen.
Yeah. And I think there's also hormone therapy options. What are the types of hormone therapy that are available? Are there risks and specific benefits that you share with patients?
Yeah, also one of my favorite topics of all time. And I encourage folks to read that Estrogen Matters book, because one thing that happened was there was a study that came out not too long ago that really confused doctors. It sort of pointed to links between hormone therapy and cardiovascular disease and cancers and things that weren't fully true, and some things not true at all, but it really scared doctors into supporting women better. And women suffered. Women are still suffering actually because of that misinformation that was put out. So that provides a lot of context into that. And it's really important that if this is of interest to you and is indicated for you, meaning you're having symptoms that feel unmanageable, you get in the hands of a doctor who's willing to have this discussion with you, because it can truly be life-changing for folks when it's safe and indicated. When we're still cycling, if we are still cycling, which is generally a case in perimenopause, even if periods are more irregular, your ovaries are still actually producing hormones. So you're still going to have estrogen, you're still going to have progesterone that kind of comes and goes. But what changes is you're not going to ovulate as much, usually not as often. And ovulation is where we get progesterone, which is kind of our calming, soothing hormone. Estrogen gives us energy. It makes us, it's more of like an action type hormone. And when we have more of that and not enough of our progesterone, that imbalance can lead to symptoms for people. To make it even more fun, that estrogen doesn't just stay kind of high, it bounces up and down. So we've got this new dynamic of hormones that we've never really experienced before. So sometimes in those early stages, supplementing with bioidentical progesterone can be really helpful to kind of just level the field to what your body knew before. Some people that's safe and indicated. Some people we want to think of alternatives, but that is an option at that time that sort of mimics what your body was doing before you got hit with a bunch of symptoms that don't feel so good. And you can still preserve a natural cycle depending on how you dose it, which allows the body to still use its natural hormones, which are always going to be better if we can than, even bioidentical or synthetic hormones for people. We may also use more comprehensive hormone therapies, including birth control, IUDs, or more comprehensive bioidentical hormone replacement therapies like estrogen patches or things like that for people. This is really going to be if people have higher risks of conditions that we can prevent with this, like Alzheimer's, osteoporosis, things like that. Or if our natural therapies aren't working for them, then we step it up. We don't need people to be suffering with stuff. I love our herbs, but I love our drugs too. And if we need to go there, it's an absolutely wonderful tool when dosed appropriately. So one of my favorites.
Thank you for walking through those options. I know we are coming up on time, but I wanted to touch on a couple more questions. Specifically, if you feel like you need to talk to your doctor about this, what's the best way to start talking to them? I think it can be kind of an overwhelming topic to just bring up. What do you advise there?
This is so important. I would encourage people to start with what has changed and follow it up with how it's impacting your life. I think the biggest barrier here is we get dismissed by our doctors and told that that's normal. So if you're having heavier frequent periods, mention that, mention the fatigue, mention it's harder to get things done because you're bleeding so much and you're having the pain. That list I listed off. If you're having any of those, bring that to their attention and let them know how it's impacting you and that it's not sustainable for you. Unfortunately, most of us do have to advocate with our healthcare providers. If you work with a functional medicine doctor, a naturopathic physician, we will ask you those things. You don't have to do that work on your end. But if you are working with a doctor and do need to do that, just make sure that you might need to advocate with those things for yourself.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, last question. Are there any long-term health risks with not addressing these things that are coming up immediately, or is it kind of up to you depending on how severe it is for you personally?
As long as you're not suffering. So I just want to remind everyone, these are 100% natural, normal transitions. Your body knows how to navigate this. It is programmed within you, whether you like it or not. And there's so much inherent wisdom in our bodies. I mean, women's bodies, they fascinate me every day. I know I get to talk about this and I'm a little biased, but truly it's the coolest. You are literally born to experience this. And if you are suffering or having symptoms that don't feel right to you, then that's when you need to go and get some better support with what's going on, whether it's in the natural realm or the medication realm. We want it to work. And I just want to remind people, we absolutely do have the tools. No matter what someone tells you, we do have the tools to help you.
Thank you. I think that will bring a lot of hope to a lot of the people listening. And yeah, thank you so much. And as we wrap up, I wanted to just touch again on, can you tell us what wisdom is? And I think that we might have a special offer for the people listening today.
We sure do. We sure do. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. I am just thrilled to represent wisdom here today for all of you. I love working at this clinic, but just to kind of recap, we are a 100% virtual naturopathic clinic designed specifically for women. That is what we do. We are all trained in this, and we are a team of physicians as well as functional nutritionists that provide longer visit and quicker care to get people in. And we have a program that offers you 10 visits with us throughout the year that are usually 30 to 60 minutes each with our team to really focus in on individualized care for you. So you as someone with perimenopause, or you as someone with cycling issues, or you as someone with fertility concerns, we work directly with you and your story, not the condition, to kind of help optimize this and help you achieve your goals and feel the best that we can possibly give to you. So the discount code that we will send out to you is pretty simple. It's Sunday's referral. And this code is going to get an additional $100 off the full price. So using this code, you're going to save almost $500 and compared to our payment plan, which is significant. And we would just certainly love to have you part of our wonderful, wonderful team. The last thing I'll say is we have wonderful care coordinators. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about Wisdom, you can book a free consultation with our onboarding team to just learn a little bit more about what we do, get your questions answered. And that's just a great way to learn more about if we could be a good fit for you.
Yeah, amazing. Well, this is the second time I've gotten the chance to talk to Dr. Sand, and I have already learned so much in just our quick conversation. So I'm sure that it would be a great fit for many of the people listening. So thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom about perimenopause. I know we got a couple of audience questions, so we will post answers to those as a follow-up and try to reach out to you directly to make sure that we give you as much information as possible. And then, yeah, we will be in touch soon. So thank you so much, Dr. Sand. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Ashley. This was wonderful.
Have a great day, everyone. Bye.